One day, a while ago, I was scrolling through YouTube on the search for anything interesting for me to consume. As usual, I was quick to find something and clicked on it. In typical YouTube manner, I got to see an ad before the video, and the message of that ad stuck to me. Negatively. I don't want to expose the ad, so I'll just tell you what the message was instead of showing it to you. The ad was promoting a book which teaches the reader everything about mobile photography. The part I found problematic was the voiceover. The speaker said something along the lines of, "This is the book for smartphone photography with a guarantee for likes." Yeah. As I heard this, I thought about the message the ad was spreading and simply couldn't get over how wrong I personally think it is. The intentions and motivation to do photography should not be reduced to likes. So in this video, I want to dive into this discussion about the intentions in photography. However, I don't want to focus on the negative and the issues I see in the ad. Instead, I want to concentrate on the positive and the beautiful diversity there is in intentions and motivations when doing photography or creating anything for that matter. Put simply, intention is the reason or purpose of your action. It's a commitment to the future by acting in favor of some result that is desired, although I would argue it isn't necessarily connected to the future. Basically, the question of intention is why? Why do you do what you do? What result that you desire are you approaching by doing what you do? So to transfer this into photography, the question posed is why do you do photography? What is your intention when picking up the camera and composing a shot? I don't count shooting without any intentions as an answer because even seemingly nothing is something, and in that case, you might just be shooting for the fun of it. In this video, I will be concentrating this question on photography, but I want to point out that this of course applies to any form of art and, if taken further, actually to any kind of action. So, once settled on what intention generally is, I came to notice that when discussing and categorizing our intentions, we inevitably split the intentions in good and bad intentions in one way or another. In other form, this could be not good and bad, but instead correct and incorrect, or in some cases this might even lead to an hierarchical arrangement. Personally, I do not feel comfortable or confident to suggest one intention being better than another. However, I still cannot resist the thought that learning smartphone photography with a guarantee for likes is not much of a good intention. The first time I thought about this topic was while listening to an episode of the photography podcast called The Contact Sheet. It was an episode with Sean Tucker featured as a guest, and at around 47 minutes into the episode, they begin discussing exactly this topic, the issue with likes and other forms of attention being the intention of photography in many cases. I think Sean wonderfully summarizes why attention is not the right intention in photography, so I'll just play his answer instead of trying to explain it myself and then continue with the other intentions I could think of or have found.
I think you have to, everyone who does anything creative, I think has to, and this is a hard thing to get honest with yourself about, but you have to do it, is ask yourself why you're making things. Mm-hmm. And if the answer is to get attention, I think you have to ask yourself some tougher questions, because no amount of attention will ever be enough. And you have to start with, did I become a photographer because I want the compliments? Because if you do, you're not going to make it, I promise you. You've got to make it because you love the making, and the act itself has to fulfill you, and you have to be able to put the response to it, positive or negative, in context. So you don't have a long time with this thing. You're going to burn out. You're going to hate it.
So, after that meaningful elaboration on the topic by Sean, I now want to continue with the other intentions one could have in photography. A personal intention could be to capture the beauty of what you see. This can be understood broadly or personally. Saying broadly, I mean anything that is generally considered beautiful, such as a peaceful photo of the sky and the sea just after sunset glowing in these rich colors, shot by Roger Sieber. When I say personally beautiful, on the other hand, I mean subjects that might not be generally viewed as anything admirable, but you subjectively enjoy the aesthetic and feel the urge to capture its goodliness. A widespread intention in photography, and possibly the most obvious, is documentation. A photograph might be an abstraction of reality, but nevertheless it does hold enough truth to function as a documentation of events, a time period, or simply your life in both its most exciting moments and the mundane. The intention here is merely the documentation to create memories you can be reminded of when looking back at your photos. A related and often also seen intention in photography is storytelling. This is closely related to documentation because a documentation tells a story, but you don't have to document to tell a story. You can stage stories. You can even do photography rather aimlessly and then find the fitting story later on in the editing process. Seeing how close documentation and storytelling are to each other and how they are connected points out nicely how overall all of these intentions are connected in a stronger or weaker way. Another intention one might argue to have when doing photography is simply art. But that is followed by the question of what is art? Isn't storytelling also a form of art and documentation just as much art as storytelling is? And I also ask myself, if art is my intention in photography, what is the intention or purpose of art? I've heard people claim that the purpose of art is to create meaning. While I disagree that art necessarily creates meaning, I think creating meaning is a possible intention in photography. Photography as a medium can hold so much meaning, and so my intention can be to pursue meaningful photography. Another intention I could think of is to help others. To not create photography for oneself, but for people who wish to see photography for whatever intentions they might have. An example I thought of here, which is directly connected to the previous point about meaningful photography, is wedding photography. Wedding photography isn't photography for oneself, instead it's for the couple, and this intention is of course just as much the intention of documentation as it is to create meaning. A wedding is a particularly special day for a couple on which they celebrate their love, so there is so much to document and so much meaning to be captured and created. However, while praising these intentions, I want to heavily emphasize the beauty of the intention simply being fun or self-fulfillment. While thinking of the great intentions I just listed, I noticed how it almost sounds like we photographers are obligated to have some thoughtful intention, such as creating meaningful photography or such. But that is not at all true, I believe. I think that only leads to pressure, which further might lead to not creating anything at all. But there is so much goodness in simply creating for the sake of it and for the fun. No second guessing on whether this will meet the client's expectations or whether the art is meaningful enough. Simply capturing impressions of your own vision can be meditative, relaxing, exciting, and just all in all self-fulfilling, and so let us never forget this side of photography, which does get easily ignored when pressured to create for an assignment or a client or attention. Why should you reflect your intentions? This video essay has led me, and hopefully you listening, to question our intentions and reflect on ourselves, but why bother doing it? I don't know if you share this feeling, but for me, self-reflection can be quite tiring. It's a strenuous mental exercise and it can become pretty self-critical, which isn't always a satisfying place in our minds to end up in. But I think it's important. It's fundamental for development and growth in maturity and character. This can be understood generally and refer to our personal character, but I want to specifically apply this to art and the creation to find an answer to the question, why do I create? Because as we heard from Sean Tucker, you might find yourself having intentions that will not lead you to a place of fulfillment, a place you will never be satisfied at. So, based on the earlier overview of what intentions can be, I want to share my own self-reflection with you and also encourage you to look into yourself. And if you feel like it, share any thoughts or insights with the community in the comments. So I'll go ahead and start. After writing down and collecting my thoughts, I came to notice that my intentions are kind of all over the place. I seem to have smaller intentions being coated by bigger, more general intentions. Often enough, I simply go out to shoot to document the process and create a video for you in the hopes to inspire you to create yourself. But underneath this intention lies a smaller intention, which can shift from each photograph. But mostly, I think when deciding what to shoot and how to shoot, my intention is to create feelings and provoke imaginativeness. I enjoy to create a photograph which, as it is, doesn't hold any meaning or a message, instead it's an impression. A frame that, when looked at, I hope to evoke a sense of the scene, a feeling of a story being told in the photo. Whatever the photograph shows is usually not so clear as to what the story is telling, which consequently leads to the viewer needing to interpret a story themselves. At least that's what I hope to achieve. A different part of myself also finds fulfilling enjoyment in documentation, more specifically self-documentation. I think I'm just quite aware of how fleeting our time is in our life, which leads to a slight fear of losing what has already been, which is only saved in one's memory. And I know that my memory is sadly not the most reliable, therefore capturing impressions of moments that are to become a memory feels comparable to backing up files on a separate hard drive. In conclusion, I think all of these intentions can be summarized in or coated by one big intention, which is self-fulfillment. What about you? I hope you enjoyed this essay on intentions in photography and I could possibly provoke some thoughts and self-reflection. If you did, I'd appreciate a like on the video, it helps the channel to grow. Consider subscribing if you haven't yet, and I'll hopefully see you again next week in the next video. Until then, goodbye.